Say right now it still looks a lot like Frankenstein.
Earlier this spring, my wife and I went out to our Alaska property and got the foundation set up for our Miracle Truss building. In July, some family and friends of mine, we all went up to Alaska and we built the Miracle Truss shop. This is the first phase of it. This phase consisted of putting all the trusses in place. Here we are moving the trusses using my buddy's boom truck. Hadn't ever used a boom before, so it was a little bit of a learning curve, but it was a super useful tool. There's no way my back would have survived the process without the use of the boom truck. Last year, all the pieces had been set in an out-of-the-way place. Here we are just moving them from where they were originally up into the workshop area. We started with the legs, figured that was the easiest way. Get them put out to the side, and then from there we put the arches into place. My shop has 6 bays, which translates into 14 legs. Getting them all put into place took us about 3 or 4 hours, just by the time you lift them up and then put them on the truck, take them up to the shop, set them into place, and then it wasn't particularly difficult, but it did take a bit of time. Right now it was just my son and I. Our goal was to get the steel beams all in place before the rest of our help came. We had about 2.5 days to accomplish this.
That's what he's saying, it moves fast. Yeah, we don't want to touch that at all.
Once we had all the legs in place, then we assembled an entire arch. Our initial thought was to lift an entire arch into place. Sounded like a really good theory. Here we are just assembling the arch, putting the leg on it. Once the arch was fully assembled, then it was time to try and lift it into place. Per the manufacturer's recommendations, all the bolts were only tightened hand tight. In my mind, I thought the arch would be really stiff and it would just lift into place pretty easily. As you can see, as we tried to lift it, it basically just bent and bowed. At this point, I was actually afraid I might twist some of the metal, which would put the whole project on standstill until I could get a new piece shipped up to Alaska. That didn't really work, so we decided to try and get underneath the beam more, and so we could get a better, more straight up lift. Here we are trying to lift the beam and then maneuver the truck into place to accomplish that. After a few minutes, it became evident this wasn't going to work. Perhaps if we'd had a taller crane, we could have lifted it straight up into the air and it would have worked fine, but with the boom truck we had, it just wasn't going to work. And at this point, twisting the metal beams was a real possibility. What we decided to do was split the arch in half and then stand up one half at a time, using the scaffolding to hold the arch into place. About this time the camera died, so we didn't get footage of this.
End of day 2 working on the garage this trip out to Alaska. Made some progress, as you can see. Camera batteries gave out at the most inopportune time, and we were working hard just to keep stuff from falling down, so have to do a recap today. Hopefully I'll get a little footage tomorrow. So this back one, we tried to stand it as a single unit, and we just ended up with all sorts of bent stuff that way. Hopefully nothing permanent. It's hard to say. Right now it looks kind of Frankenstein-y, but so then we tried one way that the instructions said to do it, and I think it said for experienced directors, which we're not, said to lift one half into place, rest on the scaffolding, then lift the other half into place and rest it on the scaffolding. And that kicked our trash. First of all, we did the right side first, and when we lifted it into place, we couldn't tell where it actually landed where it would land on the scaffolding. So we had it, you see those top planks, we had it 2 rungs higher is where we had it set. And so then once we got the next one in place, they wouldn't meet at all. So then we realized that the right one was too high. So then we had to secure the left one and then raise the right one so we could pull the plank out. And then once we got that pulled out, then trying to get them to match was a nightmare. I think that was like a 5-hour process. It was toasty today. So by the time we were done, we were about beat. But we got it up and standing, put some bracing around it as recommended. Not the world's best bracing, but it's what we got. So then the next method was on this side of a building, was to put the legs in place on both sides and then connect the roof and bolt them into place. We figured since we had short scaffolding that this might work better, and it actually went a lot faster. So today was about figuring out what not to do. The biggest problem we had actually was this middle scaffolding was in the way, and so you can see we got the truck really close to it. It's about as close as you're gonna get. Got the truck really close to it, but that boom, as high as it needed to be with those straps, couldn't quite get it straight up and down. And so if this scaffolding hadn't been here, we probably could have, it would have gone up a little faster. But then we were just able to get up there, ratchet strap some stuff together, then put in some temporary braces to make it figure an H or a box is a lot more sturdy than 2 freestanding columns. And you could tell the difference in sturdiness once we screwed the couple of them together. Like I say, right now it still looks a lot like Frankenstein. There will be a lot of straightening and truing that's going to have to happen. But first of all, we got to get everything up into place.
The next morning, after a good night's rest, we were back at it. We'd had such good success with putting the legs in and then the top of the arch that we decided to put in 2 sets of legs at the same time before we tried to lift the arch in. In the end, this led to a considerable amount of metal banging, but it worked okay for us. It was a fairly simple process. We'd lift the leg onto the bolts, then one person would hold it in place while the other person tightened the bolts. A lot of times it wasn't straight up and down, so you'd need to get the nuts on the bolts and then push it into place and then tighten the bolts. Again, the manufacturer recommended that the bolts just be hand tight. Once we had a column in place, then we would just run a 2x6 between the two columns, just to give them a little bit more structural stability. After getting 2 sets of columns in place, then came the moment of truth. We assembled one of the top arches and then just started lifting it in place. You can see that we have a rope on each end of the arch. As we did this more, we got better at holding on to those ropes, which allowed us to control the movement of the arch much better and set it into place without banging the metal quite as much. Our boom only extended so far, and so once we got the arch raised, then we'd have to back it into place. There was a lot of moving parts and pieces. Once we got the truck where we needed it to, then it was just a matter of lifting the arch into place. Here our outstanding boom operator skills are on full display. We quit counting the number of metal strikes we had. The basic process would be to lift the arch into place. Then I would get on one end, align it, put in the bolts, hand tighten the nuts. Then once my side was all secure, then my boy would climb up on his side of the scaffolding and repeat the process. This was probably our best one. Literally, the boom was in the perfect place, and we were able to just put in my bolts, and then my boy climbed up, and with very little persuasion, it slid right into place. We couldn't repeat that again if we tried. Once we got the arches in place, then we just run a 2x8 between the arches to keep them upright. At this point, arches tipping over was my biggest worry. One thing we didn't consider until we were actually in the situation was, how do you get the straps off of the top of the arch once the arch is in place? For us, it involved sliding the scaffolding along, and then my boy, who's about 4 inches taller than me, could actually reach the straps and he would get them undone.
Almost a full day. We were actually done before 5 o'clock, which is not too bad. We got 5 more supports up this afternoon, or today, just finished. Now we'll have to square it and everything. But for 2 guys working, not knowing what they're doing, I'm pretty happy with it. It looks kind of Frankenstein-y, as you can tell. I don't know that it got any better as we went along. But as we go, there'll be the bracing rods that go up. We'll get those up and that'll straighten everything out.
We got all the arches up about an hour and a half before my dad and my friends showed up. We decided to have a good Alaska welcome. So we headed out and pulled up our crab pots so we'd have some fresh Alaska crab waiting for him.